Okay, so we took a look at the very first list type structures and how we could navigate through elements of a list using for loop structures. Now we're going to look at while loops, and this may or may not operate on a list structure, but I thought it made more sense to go from uh, the for loop to the while loop, and then talk a little bit more about more advanced topics such as mutability of lists. So we've seen one type of loop so far. It was the for loop. It requires some sort of sequence, such as a string or a list, I should add. It also could be a list. Another type of loop is a while loop, and it's just going to repeatedly test some condition and continue to execute the body of the looping structure. As long as that statement is true, it terminates once it's false. There is no sequence, so we don't necessarily need like a list structure, but we might use list structures within it. It commonly is used when we're trying to meet some criterion for which we may need to go through 100 iterations or 1,000,000 iterations, and we really don't know. So let's see. Let's take a look at this little function here. It's kind of interesting. Okay, so get underscore yn. First, the response is set to blank space. So while response is not equal to y and response is not equal to n, we bring in the response type y or n to continue. It will keep requesting the user to either type a y or an n and eventually return the response, but it's going to continue until as long as we don't have a y or an n in there. Okay, so we could put in some other character string, the empty string, anything. And as long as it's not exactly y or exactly n, then we're not going to continue and we won't exit. So how many times will it run? We don't know. That's why we make it a while loop here. So let's try this one. What is printed by the following code? It's going to be on one line here just so we can put it as options A, B, C, D, E, but normally it would be in a, vertical. Okay, so first x is 6. Then what happens? Take a moment, evaluate, then we'll talk it through. All right, so the while loop goes like this. While x is bigger than 4, we print x, and then we decrease x. So at first x is 6, so we're going to get a 6. Everything has a 6 here, A and B and E. So we're down to A, B, and E. If we subtract 1 at the end, then we go back, iterate through the while loop again. X is still bigger than 4, so we're going to print 5, decrease 5 by 1, so we now have x equal 4. We're going to iterate through here. Is x bigger than 4 now? It is not, and so it terminates the while loop. Okay, so hopefully you pick A. Okay, so what if we switch direction? Starting at 6 again, we decrease 6 by 1 and get 5, we print 5. So now we're down to C and D. Iterate through, decrease it, print 4. Iterate through, we're at 4, we exit the while loop. So C, right? Okay, so when do you want to use a for? When do you want to use a while? It's pretty simple, I think. If you want to loop through some sequence, use for. If the number of iterations doesn't depend on any kind of user input or external criteria, use for. If the increment of the loop is to be the same for every iteration of your programming structure, use a for. Okay, so all of these are good uses of a for. Here we're saying S is a string. We count through the range of S. So we're going through the elements of each list or each character in the string. I said that wrong. Here we use a while. Okay, so while here count is 0, While count is less than the length of s, we do the following. As soon as it becomes the length of s equal to, then we're going to exit the for loop. I think it makes more sense to use a for loop here. Or sorry, the while loop. We'd exit the while loop down here, but it makes more sense to use a for loop here. Okay, so let's see. Which of the following passwords gets us out of this loop? Take a moment and investigate the loop. It's a while loop. So valid is false. So while not valid, okay, sorry, had an interruption there. You're going to need to know how it's going to locate or how it's going to evaluate these conditions. So valid is going to be true only when the length is 5, right? And notice the conjunction there. And well, go back and review what this is, but this is going to pull off the first 2 elements of your character string. Okay. So which ones fit that? Well, and is the important part here. So go through and think which of these work. Take it to class. I think maybe I've explained too much and it's obvious what the answer is now, but take it to class what you think the answer is. You can even evaluate it on your own to check your work. But again, making a prediction, verifying your reasoning is correct is really important to do. You can even run this function, and it's kind of nice because you can just try each of these out once you've coded this. It's not a function. I shouldn't have said function, this programming structure. Okay, so there are several ways to write a loop where the body it has to run at least one time. We can make the condition true before the loop starts, like here. We can copy some loop above the copy some of the loop code above the loop to make the condition true, or we could use true as the condition and break to exit the loop. Okay, so break causes us to just exit the loop entirely. It can be tricky to use, I think. We frequently do not allow break on exams or assignments. Okay, so it's just not always best solution. But here's some examples. While true, you enter a password. If the length meets these criteria both, then we break. Okay? This is one option for doing the same thing that we are doing here, right? So is that correct? Well, what about this one? We first get the input. While the length meets these criteria, we say enter password. Do you think both would do this? Or none? Or just A or B? Try these out, but I think there's one that clearly I think is a better approach. But I will say, I think this is maybe a better approach still. Okay, another one. Let's evaluate. What's the output of the code? First, we set n equal to 3. While n is positive, if n is 5, then we get 99, negative 99, and print n. Otherwise, we iterate up. So first, n will be 3. We print 3. All 4 options have a 3. Then we increase. If n is bigger than 0, then we continue to iterate through the while loop. We skip the if criterion again. So we're going to print n, which this time is 4. Every option has that. So we increase again, go back, we iterate through the while loop again. Now n is 5, so it gets set to negative 99. We print negative 99. So we know it has to be one of these two. Then n becomes n plus 1, so it becomes negative 98. It's no longer bigger than 0, so we exit the while. So clearly C is the only option here because we never printed before we changed the value of n from 5 to negative 99. So C's got to be what we have. Okay, bring your work to class and we'll go over some of this while we're in class.